Hi there, my name is Katie Saint, and this video is on reward systems and how to make them the most effective. Reward systems are something that we use every day in ABA therapy. And the science of ABA says that all behavior is shaped by either rewards or punishment that naturally occur in everyday life. But sometimes when we are trying to get our children to do things that they don't want to do, we create external reward systems like token systems or stickers, earning activities, things like that. Well, there's a ton of research on how to make those reward systems more effective. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit today, and hopefully I can help you guys improve your reward system so you can get your kids to do what you want them to do. So I'm going to start with some rules that we need to follow. There are certain rules that if you follow, the reward system will work a lot better. So the first one is the target behavior needs to be clearly defined. And what I mean by that is when you're first starting a reward system and the child is pretty unlikely to do the behavior, you need to be really specific about what you're going to reward. So it's not good enough to say you'll get a sticker for every time that you're good. What does good mean? You need to be very specific about it. So every time you compliment your brother, if you play for 5 minutes without fighting, if you can go the whole day without hitting or kicking, things like that, where you're specific about what exactly they need to do to earn the behavior. When it's vague, the child might be unmotivated to work for it because they don't know exactly what they need to do to earn it. Or the other people in your life might all be rewarding different things because everybody has a different definition of what the reward system is being used for. So that's super important. The next one is the token or verbal praise, or the reward needs to be given immediately after the behavior. So what I mean by that is if the child, say the target behavior is saying nice things to the child's brother, he says a nice thing to the child, to his brother, then you need to either praise him for it, give him the token. There needs to be an immediate response after the target behavior so that he's creating that association with, I did this thing they want me to do, and then good things happen to me. That's going to help that behavior increase quicker. Sometimes what happens unintentionally is the child does the good thing, but then nobody says anything about it for hours. And so there's a huge disconnect from when the behavior happens to when the reward comes, and sometimes that makes it less effective. So we want that feedback to be immediate. So the next rule is that the child cannot have access to the reward in any other way. Now, this one can be really hard to find an effective motivator that you can limit access to. But think of it this way. If you could get money for free, would you work for it? Most people wouldn't. If you could have a perfect body without working out, would you still work out? Some people would, but a lot of people wouldn't. So keep in mind that they can't have access to the reward unless they do the target behavior. So, next one. A client must know when he can turn his tokens in, and having a visual can be helpful. So what I'm referring to with this one is if the child is earning points. Say every time they give their brother a compliment, they get a point. And once they get to 20 points, then they can cash it in for ice cream or mommy sundae or whatever. So this has to be defined. So they have to know when they can turn it in, and they need to know what the limits are on it. Sometimes children will want to save their tokens for a really, really long time, but if they have 2,000 tokens and the biggest prize is only worth 50 tokens, why would they be motivated to work? So, or in the same way, if they can't turn their tokens in for 3 weeks, they're also not going to be motivated to work. So it's really helpful if you define when they can turn their tokens in and when they have to turn their tokens in, if there's a limit on that. And there absolutely should be, so that they're not earning too many and then losing motivation. So next, everyone participating in the reward system needs to be following the same rules. So everybody has to give the tokens for the same reason or the reward for the same reason. If there's variation in this, this is going to make the process slower. So next one is how and when to cash in the tokens must be appropriate for the child's functioning level. So we're going to get into this in a little bit more detail in a while, but basically what you need to gauge is if the child's 3 years old and you're making him wait a week for a reward system, that is really unlikely to work. So we want to make the rewards age appropriate and immediate enough to change the child's behavior. So next one, a variety of cash-in rewards are helpful. So it's pretty rare that the same thing will motivate a child long term. So we constantly have to be reevaluating and trying to figure out what currently motivates the child. So keep in mind, it's really normal if M&Ms work one day and stickers work one day, but then the next they don't. So keep on your toes, keep looking for things that will motivate the child. Next, a child cannot lose tokens they've earned. So we see this happening a lot when a child gets really into a reward system, they really like it, and then they do something really naughty. And people are looking for a way to give a consequence that would be meaningful to the child. And so they're like, well, they really like their reward system, I'll take tokens away. Well, what the research says about that is if you do that, you're going to ruin the motivation of the reward system. The thought process is, why would I work for it if it can just be taken away? So once the child has earned his rewards, you cannot take them away. The tokens, the points, whatever it is, once they've earned it, they're untouchable. So the only consequence in a reward system is that the child didn't earn it. So if the child's behavior was not following the rules of the reward system, so going back to my example, if my child did not give compliments to his brother, then he doesn't get the token. But if he hits his brother, and that's completely outside of the reward system, that's not what I made the reward system for, can't take away tokens for that. I need to come up with a different set of rewards and consequences for that behavior. So if you want help with that, talk to your senior therapist, talk to your therapist about creating a new plan, but don't use the system that's already in place. So next one is token value should reflect the difficulty of the behavior. So if you're asking the child to do something that you think is extremely difficult for him, really unlikely that he's going to do, you're going to need a really good motivator. You're going to need something that will compete with it. There are some behaviors that are really hard to change and take a lot of self-control and effort. So we're going to need a really high motivator to get our children to change. And so we need to be sensitive to this and recognize that if a child really, really struggles with impulsivity and all we're doing is using a sticker to reward them for controlling their impulses, it's probably not going to work. We need to find something that matches. So next I want to talk about the levels of ability to wait for rewards. So I'm going to start with level 1. So this is the child needs the reward instantly. So the behavior happens, the reward happens. It has to be paired together. So typically this is younger kids or kids maybe with ADHD, perhaps it's older kids, but difficult behaviors that are really hard to change. So this is the most difficult category for reward systems in the sense that behavior happens, reward happens. It has to be really close together. So when you're looking at your child, you need to evaluate, is this the category that my child's in right now for this behavior? If that's the case, waiting longer to give them their reward is not going to change their behavior. So this is something you need to evaluate. Level 2, they can wait until the activity is over up to an hour or so. So this means you can have a reward system that goes throughout the whole activity, but when the activity is over, they need that reward. So this is one level up from that instance. Behavior happens, reward happens. They can wait the whole activity now and then get their reward. Level 3, they can wait through several activities. Maybe you make a schedule with them and say, hey, after your morning routine is done, then you can have this. So they can do several activities before you give them their reward. So when you get to this level, you really need to be evaluating that you're correct, that they can actually wait through several activities. This is when we misjudge a lot. So we think that they can, but the reward system doesn't actually change their behavior. And that's when we find out, oh, actually, that was too long for them to wait. They need it after each step. So be monitoring that as you implement your reward system. Level 4, can wait 1 to 2 days for a reward without losing interest or motivation. So now we're to a different level that's quite a bit higher in the sense that they can wait a whole day. So rewards start to get a little bit bigger when you can wait this long. But again, you need to be monitoring if you're actually right on this. Can they actually wait a whole day? Will they remember? And when we have a reward system like this, it's also our job to remind them, hey, remember what you're working for. You're doing a great job earning it. We want to be giving them praise for their efforts and keeping them focused on their goal. So just because they don't remember on their own, but if you tell them and they're still motivated with your reminders, then you're doing okay. So just again, you're constantly evaluating, is their behavior changing for this reward system? If it is, you're on track. If it isn't, you need to adapt things. But give it a while before you change, because sometimes it takes a couple weeks for a reward system to get in place and to really be effective. So you don't want to change things too soon. So then the next level is the child can wait a full week for a reward without losing motivation or interest. Now this is a great level to be at because it's more sustainable long term. And so we can do activities and bigger prizes, things like that. And so a lot of times we will build up to this with our children, and we will basically train them to be able to wait this long. But a lot of times our kids don't start this way, and a lot of times it takes a while to get our kids to the point where they can wait that long for a reward. So one thing I want to talk about is an ADHD diagnosis. If your child is diagnosed with ADHD, it is very rare that waiting a week for a reward will be effective in changing their behavior. Typically, people with ADHD are going to need more instant rewards and more instant feedback. And so just be mindful of that if you have a child who struggles with ADHD tendencies, that they're probably going to need quicker rewards to change their behavior. So next, I want to talk about how to fade rewards out so that it becomes internal and you don't need to keep giving the child a piece of candy or token or sticker or whatever to change their behavior. So basically the process that we typically follow is we start with an object, a tangible thing that they can have in response to their behavior. Then we maybe would move away from tangible objects to activities and fun things that they can do, quality time with people. During all of these rewards, we're giving them verbal praise, Because what we want to do is we want to pair our praise, our, hey, you did a great job. I like that you're working hard. I like that you're trying. We want to pair those comments with the objects that they really like so that they're starting to create that association between words make me feel good and so do these objects. So next, we want to be intentional about what kind of phrases we use. So we don't want to give the really general statements. Actually, research says that when you say good job without defining it, it can actually raise anxiety instead of increasing behavior. So what we want to do then is be more specific. So, hey, I really liked that you almost said something mean to your sister, but then you stopped yourself and you didn't. And instead, you just said good job for playing the game or whatever. So you're being really specific with your praise to them. Also, you want to be intentional about praising the process. So, and helping them be more aware of the process. So you say things like, doesn't it feel good to manage your emotions? Isn't it cool that you didn't get super mad this time and we could keep playing then and have more fun? And so you're pointing out the benefit to them of why it feels good to manage their emotions. So then next, you want to start to fade activities and the distance from the reward. So when you see that the child can handle the reward, is really, the system's working really good, you want to really slowly start to fade that out. So this is something sometimes we have to toy with a little bit, because if we go too fast, the behavior typically will come back and we'll sabotage our progress if we fade it out too fast. So this is something we do really slowly and we monitor it really closely. So after that, you will also, well, throughout this whole process, really, we use what's called labeling theory. And so what labeling theory is when you tell somebody something often enough, you begin to take it in as truth, and you begin to take that in as your identity, and it shapes your behavior. So if I'm told all the time that I'm lazy, say my whole life I've been told I'm lazy, I'm going to start to believe that. I'm going to start to change my behaviors to act like somebody who's lazy. But if I'm told my whole life that I'm a hard worker, I'm smart, I do tough things, then I'm going to do that. And so we want to use labeling theory to our advantage with our kids. It's really hard sometimes to not point out the flaws in our children and be like, you need to stop doing that. You're always misbehaving and things like that. But that really doesn't help us when we start talking to our kids that way. So we want to tell them what we want to see more of in terms of labeling. So an example is you catch them staying calm, tell them, wow, you are so good at staying calm. Look at you go. That was awesome how you just regulated your emotions. You're really good at that. Or, man, you're a really good listener. Your brother just told you a super long story and you had awesome listening skills. Great job at being a great friend. So you're giving those labels of things you want to see more of. So next, I want to talk about scenarios. And I'm going to present some scenarios, and then I'm going to talk about how we would fix them. So here's some common scenarios that come up that sabotage reward systems. So number one, the child doesn't seem to change their behavior for the reward system. The reward is the iPad, but they have access to phones, tablets, and computers. So basically what's happening in this scenario is the reward that was picked out, the child has too much access to. So he's like, why should I work for this when I can just get these other things that are pretty much the same thing? So if you see that happening in your reward system, you can work on limiting those kind of things so the child is more motivated. Number 2, the child isn't changing his behavior for the reward system. The parents are following the rules to the system, but one of the therapists and the grandparents who babysit a lot define behaviors differently. So what's happening here is the target behavior isn't defined enough. And so there's different people doing different things. And because of that, the behavior is not changing in response to it. So sometimes when we're fading reward systems out, we might intentionally get more vague and be more general, but that's after the behavior is under control and we want to start fading those rewards out. In the beginning of a reward system, everybody needs to be on the same page. So if you notice that people aren't, talk to your senior therapist about it so we can make sure that everybody understands and they know what's expected and everybody's defining the behaviors the same. So next, the child can earn a reward once per week for good behavior. He picks his reward out at the beginning of the week, but hasn't earned it in over a month. Okay, so if it's been a month that the child hasn't earned his reward, your reward system's not working. So it needs to be achievable. You need to pick a goal that the child can actually achieve. And then you can make it harder and harder as you go. But if the child hasn't earned it in a month, it's very unlikely that it's motivating to him at all. So you're going to need to adapt that. Next one. The behavior occurs 15 times a day. The child can earn a reward for not displaying the behavior once per day, but it doesn't seem to be healthy. Well, when you have a frequency that high of 15 times a day, that's a long time to ask the child to not do it to get the reward. So chances are you're gonna need something more immediate. Maybe every couple of activities, maybe every activity. So those are the kinds of things that you need to evaluate and make sure are the appropriate length of time. Next one, on the weekends, the reward system is not used, but the rest of the week it is. Behaviors have remained high. So basically what's happening here then is that the child needs that consistency. There's something called behavioral contrast. And so when environments are different, say the weekend's really different from the weekdays, things like that, sometimes that the contrast causes behaviors to continue and it makes it really difficult for them to go away. So if that's happening, that's going to prevent you from making progress. So sometimes we need to make things completely consistent across the board. So the reward systems are used in every environment and every person in the child's life is using the reward system the same way. So the last example I want to talk about is reward system. The reward system just started and the behaviors are getting worse. So this is a good thing for people to know about, that it's common. When a reward system first starts, sometimes the child is mad that they can't get that reward instantly. They're motivated by the reward system and they really want it. And so sometimes that results in early tantrums. Push through this and wait and see if it's just the reward system starting out. Give it a couple weeks, see if the child can work through it. If it never changes the behavior after a couple weeks, then you need to change something. So at this point in the video, I want to invite you to either stay tuned for more technical information about reward systems, or walk away, turn off the video if you've gotten enough of information about reward systems. Next, I want to talk about different types of reward systems and the ABA terms for them. So there is a fancy term called differential reinforcement. And what that means is we're rewarding a specific behavior and then we're blocking the alternative bad behavior or problem behavior. So an example of that is I am ignoring the attention-seeking yelling, but when my child sweetly says to me, "Hey mom, can I have your attention?" then I'm giving him that attention. I'm rewarding the attention. and I'm ignoring the screaming. So that's differential reinforcement. Now there's different types of differential reinforcement, and I'm going to go through them. So the first one is a DRO, differential reinforcement of other behavior. So what a DRO is you're basically rewarding the child for going a certain length of time without having a problem behavior. Every 5 minutes that you go without hitting me, you get a M&M. Yay! You know, things like that. We use those kind of reward systems a lot, especially for internal behavior. So say the child hits themselves in the head a lot. And we might use a reward system like that. Every 5 minutes you go without hitting yourself in the head, you can earn a point or a sticker or whatever. So that's a DRO. The next one is DRA. So differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. And what that is you're rewarding a specific alternative behavior. So if I don't want the child to hit themselves in the head, but rather I'd like them to just give themselves squishes, I'm going to block them from hitting themselves in the head, and then I'm going to reward them for when they squish. So this is a specific instance that they do. And so then you could fade out if you're rewarding them every time or every couple of times. You would have to determine that based on where they're at with their motivation levels. Next is DRI, and what that stands for is differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior. So now you're reinforcing a behavior that is impossible for them to do at the same time as the problem behavior. So this is used in schools a lot. So I'm going to reinforce you for sitting in your chair because the alternative behavior is you running around the classroom. So that would be an incompatible behavior. You can't sit in the chair and run around the classroom at the same time. Next is a DRL, differential reinforcement of low rates of behavior. So we use this with stimming a lot. So a lot of times we don't want to completely get rid of stimming, but we do want to reduce it. So then we're going to say, if you make your stimming screeching sound 3 times per hour instead of 7, then you get this reward. So we're okay with you doing it some, just not as often as you've been doing it. So you just want to get those numbers down, but we're not completely eliminating the behavior. Next is DRH. And what that stands for is differential reinforcement of high rates of behavior. So this is where we want the behavior to increase. So sometimes we'll use this for initiating going to the bathroom, or we'll use this for talking a lot. The more words you use, the more often you use a full sentence, we're going to reward that. And we're going to ignore when you don't use full sentences or things like that. So now I want to give you some real life examples of where these kind of things naturally occur. So for a DRO, remember that's differential reinforcement of other behavior. We're reinforcing the absence of a behavior. Many people will keep a cat as long as the cat doesn't pee all over their house. But once the cat starts peeing all over their house and they can't solve the problem, a lot of people will get rid of the cat. So basically the cat was on a DRO schedule. DRA. When you use a nice tone to ask for things, remember, differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. So for this one, there's a specific behavior that you're using instead, and you're reinforcing that. So when you use a nice tone of voice to ask for things, your husband says yes to you. But when you say it in a rude tone or with attitude, then he says no. So that would be an example of a naturally occurring DRA, differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. Next, DRI. This is differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior. And so not speeding is reinforcing, and you can't not speed and speed at the same time. So you get reinforced by not getting a speeding ticket. And so that would be a DRI. Next, DRL. Mom takes her kids to ice cream because they only fought one time during the day instead of the typical 10. So she's feeling good that it's a lower rate of behavior. Now, the next one, DRH. Your husband did the dishes every day of the week, and you were really grateful, so you made him a really nice supper for his high rates of doing dishes. So that could be a way that you have implemented differential reinforcement of high rates of behavior. So that is the gist of the technical terms for reinforcement systems. Reinforcement systems work really well if we do them right. The most common problem we run into is just not having the right motivators. We need to switch up the rewards a lot. A lot of times what I'll do with kiddos is have a whole book of rewards. So I'll sit down with them and I will hash out as many rewards as I can possibly think of with them. And then I have them pick each time, like, hey, what do you want to work for today? What do you want to work for this week or through this activity, to make sure that whatever we have in place is motivating to them, because that is the number one way that it will get sabotaged. The number two way is that people are inconsistent with it. People aren't following the rules, or they have access to the reward anyway, so why are they going to work for it if they don't have to? So keep in mind that reward systems work really good if we do them right, and we can work on fading them out. We have lots of systems in place to be really effective with making kids not dependent on reward systems and fading that so that it's intrinsic. So don't be worried that we're going to be rewarding your kid for the rest of their life. So we'll work with you on that. So let us know if we can offer you more support in this area. All right, hope you enjoyed the video.